Good morning. Welcome to EHDV Electric Truck on the Horizon webinar. My name is Piotr Żółkowski and I'm New Mobility Expert in Polish Alternative Fuel Association, PSPA. Today I will show you a short presentation about truck market and its development towards electrification, which will open the topic for further discussion in which our guests will take part and which will be moderated by my colleague Alexander Reich, the External Affairs Director in PSPA. But let's jump to the topic. Heavy-duty transport sector is facing a number of challenges related to the electrification and the expansion of the charging infrastructure. These are challenges that we must take up as electrification of this sector is a key important on the way to the reach climate neutrality by European Union. Heavy-duty vehicles accounts only for 5% of total car fleet in European Union, but at the same time they are account for almost 20% of all carbon dioxide emission from the road transport sector. They are also responsible for almost 40% of NOx's emissions, which are particularly the most harmful for humans. This market is also very important for Poland because Poland has the biggest truck fleet in Europe. We've got almost 1.2 million vehicles over 3.5 tons. Every fifth truck and van traveling on European roads has Polish number plates. It's connected to the leading role of Polish carriers, which are responsible for transport of almost 1/3 of all cargo shipments in Europe. It's also connected with the crucial role of the TCL sector in Polish economy. It's generating 6% of Polish gross domestic product and gathers almost 125 companies which are employing nearly 800,000 people. Polish market is also very important from the perspective of the car manufacturers because Poland is the third biggest market in Europe. Only France and Germany registered more vehicles, more trucks than Poland. Last year, we registered almost 53,000 trucks, which was the highest figure in the history. But if it comes to the development of the electrification on this market, we have to remember that we are still on the beginning of the road. But we are starting from slightly different position that it was with the passenger cars because we already addressed some of the barriers and overcome them somehow. For example, the weight of the batteries is no longer such a big issue, or the decreasing prices of the batteries, which are leading to the even more competitive total cost of ownership in every year compared to the combustion vehicles. However, there are still some barriers that need to be addressed, like for example, lack of the suitable subsidy program, at least in Poland. The market offer is still limited, mostly if it comes to the heaviest trucks, around 40 tons. And the main barrier, the biggest issue that we identify is the lack of dedicated charging infrastructure for heavy-duty vehicles. But we'll talk about it a little bit later in our discussion. But European Union committed car manufacturers to accelerate this transition, and they are obliged to reduce the carbon dioxide emission from sold vehicles. From 2025, the reduce supposed to be on the level of 15%, and from 2030, it's supposed to be at least 30%. We can see that the market is growing. Last year, we registered in Europe 346 vehicles, which was an increase of almost 200% compared to the previous year. But this number is still very low, and it shows on how early stage we are if it comes to the development of this market. But if we see on the market readiness to electrify this sector, as I said before, The biggest barrier is the infrastructure, because by 2030 the truck fleet in Europe will increase 60 times, and by this time they will consume almost a third of the total charging energy in Europe. They will be main customer for for fast DC charging. And so far, the development of the charging infrastructure is results only from the market demand. But European Union is preparing to introduce the AFI regulations, which will regulate the development of the charging infrastructure dedicated to the heavy-duty transport. The final version has not been prepared yet. However, the latest proposal is to build a charging station every 120 kilometers on 15% of the length of TNT network, and the power of the station is supposed to be at least 1.4 megawatts, and we are talking about year 2025. By 2030, this power is supposed to even grow to at least 3.5 megawatts on whole TNT network, on core TNT network. And it's supposed to be located every 60 kilometers. Currently, we've got none of station dedicated to the heavy-duty transport on Polish TNT network. We still believe that we are on the beginning of the process of electrification of this market, but to protect the leading role of Polish market, we're supposed to take specific measures, and we're supposed to take it as soon as possible. In order to develop this market and to support this market, PSPA has launched the EHDV Infrastructure Lab project, which will strive to develop charging hubs for heavy-duty transport. We developed this project with wide range of companies from whole value of chain. We are supported by car manufacturers, by charging station producers, by logistic firms, retail, and financial institutions. The main goal of our project is to build know-how which will enable us to launch the pilot charging hub for heavy-duty transport, and which will help in further development of this market. In the project, we also want to design a charging station of the future. We want to identify a location for charging hubs for heavy-duty trucks, and also to analyze a potential support mechanism dedicated to EHDVs. It was only a small piece of our project, but the electrification of heavy transport will be discussed in more detail on New Mobility Congress, which will be held in Łódź from 12 to 14 September. The entire third day will be devoted to the heavy-duty transport and its electrification. So I want to invite you to participate in Congress. And now I can give the floor to Alek.
Welcome everyone to the next part of the webinar. It'll be a panel discussion. I have some esteemed guests with me today, amongst them Rafał Czerzewski, the CEO of Greenway Poland, Janusz Grącki, the CEO of Eleport, Sandor Dareta, the Global e-Truck Segment Manager for ABB, Semih Tecek, Project Manager for Sharon, and Jakub Matecki, the Electromobility Key Account Manager, Volvo Trucks Poland. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm glad to have you here as guests, and it'll be great to discuss the issues that Peter introduced us to. I think we have to start first by knowing really what the situation is. In terms of public EV charging stations, we have around 2,290 such stations in Poland. That's about 4,500 charging points. A little over 660 of these are DC charging stations, so we're still a little bit behind Western Europe. But I think the best person to tell us about the present state of the ultra-fast EV charging infrastructure in Poland is Rafał Czerzewski. Please tell us what the state of ultra-fast infrastructure is right now in Poland?
Hi, hello. First of all, thank you very much for invitation to this webinar. As we are talking about a very important topic ahead of us, which is the electrification of heavy transportation. Greenway is a leading charging point operator and electromobility service provider. We started in 2016, so at the very beginning of implementation of electric vehicles in Poland. So I think we have quite good knowledge and experience regarding development of this sector. So maybe let me start with the following statement that despite of the quite rapid growth of the charging infrastructure in recent years, I still believe that we are at the very beginning of the road. As you said, there are more than 2,000 charging stations in Poland. More than 600 of them are DC chargers. And the numbers are growing quite fast, especially in recent 2 or 3 years. I just remember that at the beginning of 2019, they were just over 500 stations in total. And out of that, only about 200 DC stations were installed in Poland. When we look at the ratio between the number of chargers to number of electric vehicles, this ratio is quite good because there are about 12 electric cars per every public charger in Poland. But generally taking into account the size of the country and the future growth of electric vehicles, the growth of this infrastructure is necessary in order to keep the pace of the electrification of transportation. What we observe in recent years is that the pace of the development of infrastructure is slower than the increase of the number of electric vehicles in Poland. So there is a quite significant risk that soon the development of this infrastructure will be too slow to meet the growing demand. Therefore, I think that it's necessary to accelerate the development of charging stations because without that we are going to encounter quite significant barriers in the future, which may slow down the development of the whole sector. And one of the biggest needs here is further development of fast or ultra-fast chargers dedicated both to passenger cars and in the future to heavy-duty vehicles, because it is a necessary part of the infrastructure for development of electrical vehicles. As it was already said, for the time being, the development of stations applies only to passenger cars in public and private space, and also for chargers for electric buses in cities where such transport is implemented. This will change because according to the forecast that were presented in the presentation, the demand for heavy duty trucks charging will be even greater than the demand from passenger cars. So we are at the moment where we should start thinking about the development of the infrastructure dedicated to heavy transportation. And the project that has been started by PSPA, I think, is very important to gather necessary experience and generally to support electrification of heavy transportation.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for outlining the landscape for us in terms of fast and ultra-fast charging infrastructure. So we know the situation and how it is, but I would like to ask Janusz Gronsky about the main barriers to develop infrastructure in Poland and what the challenges related to those barriers are for CPOs. If you can explain that side of the issue.
Hello, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be here with you. When we discuss about the barriers and what we are see to get today, the main problem is about the power of the station is what is available from the grid connections. It means more than 70% of the stations what we have today is mainly AC chargers. It means it's not enough power for the trucks. Also, what is about what we are thinking about is to upgrade these grid connections. That's great that we have the subsidies here that we can use for that. But other points is how fast is the whole market is growing, because the problem is that the people still love fuel cars in Poland. That way, when we compare the numbers, what we have today, we have more or less 4,400 public charging units and 7,600 gas stations. It means we are still need to have the hyper grow to achieve that kind of the goals what we need to address, mainly for the heavy transport. And petrol warships is that social still need more awareness about the electricity, like trainings, knowledge, and also to see how many cars we have available, not only the trucks, but also like passenger cars that they can try it and start believe it. And what we see that 97% cars what is sell here in the Central Europe is still fuel cars. That way we need to think how to upgrade that kind of the knowledge in that end customers to migrate their point of view to the electric cars. Other points is limited power supplies. It means in common that power 100 kilowatts is almost impossible to implement everywhere we really need it for the tracks. It means we need to find the location, and this is, I think, the crucial point from our side, where we have the really good visibility, really good traffic that we can cover our models of IRR, and also that we will have enough power to build it. And that way, this is really important to collaborate with a local DSO to have to upgrade this power and also to have this power available for the trucks, because we know that 250 kilowatts is like the minimum what we need to address. 100 kilowatts, I think, is absolutely minimum what should be there on the road. Other thing is old inefficiency energy transfer infrastructure based on coal, what we have in Poland. That way, this is also one of the reasons why people still don't want to believe that electric car will be more cleaner than we have today transport. That way, from that kind of the cases, there is a lot of jobs that should be done also about the alternative fuels and also about the green energy that will be provided to all of that stations that we can cover it. And also what we are see, this is about the parking spaces, because that premium locations that we want to address is something that we need to also think that we can put at least 2 tracks for each of the charger and few standard passenger cars. It means it's a huge location that we need to address, and also cost of investment is really high. That way, when we see how many things we need to address, it means find the best locations, address that the needs of the tracks and the parking slots, and also that we understand the car trip journey, like the communication, what should be addressed there, and grid connections. It shows how difficult it will be, but we have a lot of experience from other countries. And what is great that other CPOs want to also build it. That way, when we have this all knowledge together, that I'm really sure that we can change that the all habits what we have. It means we will charge, because people mainly think that we will charge only on the fuel stations. The new habits is that we can charge everywhere, also in the parking slots and the nights, also in the places when they need to park. That way, it's not only fuel stations. The new habits that we want to promote it, it's really important to change the point of view also about the heavy transport owners. And when we discuss about the AFIR reliance in Poland, it's also that we need to think about the 10T charging network. And this is that we know that main company responsible, the Polish state company responsible about the roads, with the CPOs want to build 34 charging stations from the main roads. This is really important, and the power should be there, more or less 350 kilowatts or more. That way, it's really difficult to have it, but it's great that we have 34 locations today that we can think about that to have that kind of that heavy transport and the minimum power of the trucks, because the time when they are waiting and the time for the charging is really important. Have you also show for the heavy transport that not only electricity but also hydrogen station will be crucial, and you have a lot of projects, 7 cities today when they want to build the chargers, mainly for the public transportation, but also for the heavy transport. That way, we see how huge speed we have in that kind of the type of the thinking. When we start thinking about the hydrogen a few years ago, no one want to build it, but now we see a lot of strategies from the main players from the Poland that they want to be there. And also, what we also see in on the Polish field that we have a lot of other CPOs that they want to come here to build the charging stations, because when we look now we have more or less 3,000 stations. That is really impressive number, but we know that this is before we will grow. When we are looking for that Polish EV outlook, it should be 40,000 public chargers soon. That way, when we have that kind of the capacity of the chargers available, but I'm really sure that also heavy transport can start immediately. And what was crucial that our knowledge, what we have from other markets, and also what we built in Poland, Baltic countries, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, this is the holistic solutions. It means not only the chargers and also for the payment system software for to calculate the best tariffs for that kind of the transport, and also all maintenance and services. That way, when we have that kind of the partner that can cover the holistic solutions for the heavy transport, we can address a lot of needs from the market.
Thank you. That's a very succinct explanation, and thank you for this for all this information. Really, you touched upon a lot of things, but I think one major issue is the power capacity and the grid resilience, and I think this is a big challenge, especially when we talk about the megawatt charging stations, the MCS solutions. And I would like to ask Semik Tetik from Sharon, what is the status of the implementation of MCS at this point?
Yeah, so we are discussing the MCS, the megawatt charging solution, since 2018 within Charon. And the current status is that we have already launched the MCS at the EVS 35 this year, a couple of months ago. And so the design of the connector is pretty fixed. So with our members from Charon, a great amount of industry players involved, we decided this design, and we are also working on the communication side of the MCS technology. We decided also for the differential PLC as a physical layer, and as a protocol layer, we will use the ISO 15118-20. That is the most that it makes the most sense to use that, because there is no charging station from now available, and also no truck with a megawatt charging array available currently. So it makes sense to build these charging stations from the beginning on with -20 capability. And yeah, that's the current status, and we are also having tests regarding the MCS from, for example, in the University of Zwickau. We have some communication tests regarding the differential PLC and the noise emission. We are also having some short circuit tests in the near future, and there are also some tests going on in the NREL test facilities in North America. So they are making some system level tests, like current flow, like cable handling, like a couple of other system related tests. So the developments are ongoing, and we are looking forward for the first implementations on the market. And yeah, so that's it.
Okay, so it's approaching, and the grid necessity or the energy necessity that will need the MCS, that solution will be very huge. So that's another challenge. But before we delve into that, I think it's also interesting because we have Sandor Doretta from ABB, and ABB, of course, is a global company, but very active in Europe, and I think Swedish markets, German markets, very developed in terms of e-mobility. But it's interesting to see what the best practices are that are implemented on those markets, and maybe how they could be applicable for the CE region, for Poland. What do you think those kind of benchmarks could be, and what are your observations from those markets?
ABB is a front runner in the EV transition from the beginning. We have an experience of more than 130 years in electrification, so electrification is not new for us. We have a lot of best practices in Europe, like, for instance, building large CPO networks, like Ionity, a great example of a pan-European network. But also we have a lot of experience within the beginning of the EV standardization, but also from the bus market. For example, we've recently built the world's largest bus depot in Qatar. And we're also doing it now for the e-truck segment, where I'm responsible for. We're doing in Norway. We're currently building the largest e-hub for e-trucks for a retailer called ASCO, where they will have more than 50 outlets on a site. But when I look at the EV transition for e-trucks, we really see it into the different use cases. So, like, where will the transition start? So it will be first like regional and short mile logistics, and then the long haul logistics. So with the short and medium mile logistics, they will primarily charge at their depot or the destination. So there you can do like the overnight charging. So there it's also not the super high power needed, but there you can do like with 150 kilowatt overnight charging, while when you have like long haul transport that we already are seeing in other countries throughout Europe, then you really need to have the higher power, because in Europe we have the mandatory rest of 45 minutes after 4.5 hours of driving. So there, during that time frame of the 45 minutes, the MCS will be really useful to drive another 4.5 hours until your next mandatory rest. So at ABB, we are continuously developing chargers for that use case. So we're also developing the megawatt charging system, also part of sharing. And we are together with the entire market, so also with the truck OEMs, working on, okay, what's the typical use case? How can we make the transition from ICE to EV? Because in one way or another, in many countries, there is already a TCO parity. For instance, in Germany, the TCO parity with diesel is already there. So when we look at Poland, which is of course a big contributor to international transport, they will be faced with zero emission zones throughout Europe. So that will also accelerate the market in Poland itself. But we really need to look at the sites, because it's always the chicken and the egg, in terms of the infrastructure and the vehicles. The charging infrastructure technology is already there. Topics like energy management, battery energy storage, we already have it as a technology. So we are really happy to contribute to the projects in Poland to accelerate the e-truck business.
Well, thank you. That's a nice kind of helicopter view, and it's very interesting to hear all the interesting projects you're involved in. I think the chicken and egg problem and the strong, I think, correlation between the development of the infrastructure in its various categories, and of course the car park and the ice leakage challenge and the problems of TCO parity. which for some segments like electric buses is already much overachieved by electric buses over diesel buses, is very interesting. And I think that brings us to the next topic, and that is the topic of one thing is the chargers, so the chicken and egg problem comes back again, but another thing are the vehicles. And we have Volvo Trucks Poland with us today. And so I'm interested to find out, what is the client demand for EHDVs per your observations, taking into account that last year out of the 30,000 LGVs and HDVs in Poland, 4 registrations were zero emissions. So how do you see that client demand growing for EHDVs? Mr. Jakub Madecki, please.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity to join the webinar. If you are talking about customer demand, I think it's a little bit too early to talk about customers' demand for HDV trucks in Poland, because we at the beginning of this journey. The first heavy-duty truck by Volvo will be delivered to Poland within a few weeks. So this is the point where customers will start to learn how to use electric vehicles. Why I'm talking about learning, because until now most of the customers are focused on diesel trucks or LNG trucks, and they are focusing on the long haul transportation. As we understand, currently the range of the electric truck heavy duty is around 300 kilometers. If you are talking about long haul driving, the range required by the customers are much more than that. So what we need to focus on is local short distance transportation, and this is what we need to do, what we need to focus, because currently customers have a little bit different approach, a little bit different customs. If you are talking about heavy duty transport, I mean tractors with semi-trailers. The little bit different situation is if we are talking about the rigids. Here is the potential for a local transportation for a little bit shorter ranges, but this is the issue discussing, which we are discussing with our customers for last at least a year, how to utilize the electric truck in the best way. And of course, charging stations, power of the charging stations is one of the issues. So it's obvious that our customers, if they are buying a new car, a new truck, they want to utilize it as much as possible. So the planning for the important demand from my customers is the support from us how to plan their work. So to help them find the charging places, to help them find the best truck for them. I'm talking about range, I'm talking about size of the batteries, and of course the charging speed, meaning the charging time, of course. Other issue is that electric trucks are much more heavy than diesel trucks. So one of the demands is to increase gross combined weight of the truck with a trailer, because of course they want to transport as much goods as possible. So first thing is to plan the transport, plan the route. Second thing is how to plan the charging. And the third thing is to find a solution how to transport not less goods than with diesel trucks. So what's on my mind is some changes in regulations to allow higher gross combined weights for trucks. And the last thing, but not least, incentives. Most of the European countries offers incentives for electric vehicles, including heavy-duty trucks. Currently in Poland, we have incentives only for passenger cars. So, in my opinion, incentives and also support from manufacturers or dealers of trucks how to acquire such incentives for trucks is very important.
I see. This is a very interesting transition from the infrastructural challenges to the vehicle challenges, and we see the capacity that we need. And we could talk for hours, and I hope we will in Łódź. But I will pass maybe round back with a final round of questions, but just please a minute or 2 minutes each. If I can ask, maybe I'll start with you, Mr. Matecki. Actually, what are Volvo's ambitions in terms of EHDVs for the near future, for maybe the long-term future?
Of course, our ambition is to still be the leader of electric trucks transition. But if you are talking about hard numbers, plans, we want to, until 2030, we want to sell at least 35% of electric trucks, comparing to full portfolio.
I see. That is very ambitious indeed. I think everyone has their fingers crossed for this plan. And so getting back into the future of the sector, maybe more widely, Mr. Doretta, if you can tell us what your view on the future of the EHDV sector is per ABB.
Yes. The transition for zero emission trucks will go into a steep curve. I think it's really underestimated in the market because we are going to face a steep curve into zero emission. That's all also very big related to the TCO. So nice, that also was mentioned that in Poland there are no incentives. There's a big difference between the countries, and that can really help accelerate the market. And we see a big steep curve coming into Northwest Europe. So in countries like Germany, the Netherlands, so Benelux, but also France, and also related to the TCO parity. So the transition can be done already with the technology. So the vehicles are ready, the charging infrastructure is ready, but we just need to act right now. And definitely regulations and funding is needed. So we forecast a very good future related to charging infrastructure. And we need to do it together with all partners and integrate it into the daily operations.
Like the PSPA EHDV Infrastructure Lab project, I guess, which brings the market together. But I think we're talking a lot about the e-mobility focused issues here, but maybe I can ask Semih Tetik from Sharon, what other sectors could benefit from the MCS, from that solution? What do you see? What other areas, economic areas, could benefit?
Sure. So from our point of view, the MCS, so the megawatt charging technology we promote, is not only for truck use cases, it's also for maritime applications, for aeronautic applications. And I would say this is also a main point that will drive this technology, because we see also big interest in these sectors. To having the electrification, and so I'm looking forward for the sector also to grow in the upcoming years. So there are a lot of projects going on.
I see. And so coming back again to the energy consumption, nearly 1/3 of the energy consumption within the DC ultrafast charging infrastructure will be consumed by the EHDV segment. So what is Greenways' strategy in this regard for Poland, for the CE region, as one of the key players?
So, as I said before, Greenway has been so far fully focused on the development of charging infrastructure for passenger cars. And we also implemented some, let's say, B2B projects related with the electrification of the fleets. The main reason for that is this kind of chicken and egg problem, as there are no electric heavy trucks. There is no demand for charging and no investments into those chargers. But as you said, we are aware that in the coming years we will witness a rapid development of this segment. So we not only started preparations to be a player and a service provider, but also we started some projects that are now mainly related to offering dedicated solution for charging of let's say delivery vehicles, delivery vans in private locations. Mainly these are logistic centers. So I'm talking about rather short haul transportation. It's not only offering just chargers, but kind of turnkey solutions that are prepared in accordance with our clients' requirements. But of course, the other area which we are very interested to be part of is the development of public infrastructure for heavy trucks. Therefore, we are a part of PSP project. We have already indicated over a dozen of potential locations that has been already secured by us, where it would be possible to build charging hubs for trucks with necessary power connection to the energy networks. And generally, based on those experience from those pilot projects and also in line with the development of the market, we will make decisions regarding the timeline of implementation of such projects on a large scale in the future. But for sure, we are very interested to be engaged in this kind of projects. But once again, I would like to mention that all the development of the charging infrastructure in Poland, I think also in other countries, is very much related to readiness of distribution system operators' grids to connect high power chargers. I personally believe that is one of the major problem in our country, that the network of DSO is not developed, especially at locations close to highways, main roads in the country. And without big investments that should be started right now, we will have huge problems with the implementation of high power chargers in the future. So it's very important now to advocate that new measures, new actions aimed at expanding the electricity distribution network must be started as soon as possible. Otherwise, we'll have huge problems in this regard.
Well, that's very interesting to hear that. And actually, Janusz Gronsky, you mentioned AFIR, so maybe we'll top it off with that. We have within the 10T system, which is regarded as one of the basis for LDV, HDV infrastructure development, we have less than 20 megawatts within the 211 stations located on the 10T network in Poland. But we need over 200 megawatts per AFIR in 225. That is 2.5 years. Just for Poland alone. Do you think, and Elaport has big plans, and we are very excited about this, but do you think Poland and the sea will cope with these targets and these requirements?
It will also depend on the government support, because we know that all of us want to build it. We have funds to have it, but the idea is who can give it us that energy. We are collaborate with the companies from the Baltics, that we have a lot of projects with the PPAs, that we can have this energy, but how to transfer to Poland and to have the grid connections. This will be tricky to have it that way. I think the close collaboration with energy and utilities market will be crucial, and support from government is really, really important. Like we have today in the subsidies for the AC and DC chargers, there is bigger part of the cake is covered by grid connectors, not for the chargers. That way, I think in the future, we also need to think about that kind of subsidies for that kind of the project like you have today. It means about the heavy transport.
Thank you. So we have problems like DSO networks, lack of power, grid resilience, but we have challenges and needs like incentives and the rise of demand and more government support. All this is, I think, food for thought and a lot of discussion to ensue. I'm glad to think that I will see most of you, if not all of you, at the New Mobility Congress in September, and we can continue this discussion. Thank you very much. I would have loved to talk to you more about this, but time restrains us, so I'll pass the floor back to Piotr. I was joined today by Rafał Czerzewski, the CEO of Greenway Polska, Janusz Grącki, CEO of Eleport, Sandor Doreda, Global eTruck Segment Manager, ABB, Sami Tetik, Project Manager at Sharon, and Jakub Matecki, Electromobility Key Account Manager, Volvo Trucks, Poland. Thank you. Thank you very much.
There is no doubt that electric trucks are on the horizon, but before they reach us, we must to overcome some barriers and prepare the market and ourselves for this transition. Thank you very much for the attention. The electrification of heavy transport will be discussed in more detail on the New Mobility Congress, on which once again I would like to invite you, and I hope that we can see in Łódź. Thank you very much.